Joining us, New York Times chief White House correspondent and MS Now contributor Peter Baker, MS Now contributor Inzamam Rashid in Dubai, and retired four-star general, and MS Now military analyst General Barry McCaffrey. The president keeps saying, Peter, that they're never going to be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. And, you know, David Rhodes been on the show a lot of times. Other analysts have been saying the same thing. If you don't want them to have a nuclear weapon, you've got to do regime change. This regime is never going to give up a nuclear weapon.
Yeah. And when the president says that they keep changing their mind, there's no indication that they ever change their minds. Only indication the president has changed how he characterizes what they are saying. Remember, the president said multiple times, oh, Iran has agreed to give up its nuclear program. Well, there's no evidence that they ever agreed to that. Only he has said that. And they've made very clear that they're not willing to do that. And I think you're right to point out this is without regime change, it's hard to imagine that they would. This is not a different regime. It's the same regime, just different players in there, right? It's not Ayatollah Khamenei. Obviously, he's been killed. A number of others have been killed. But literally, it's Khamenei's son is now the supreme leader, and others in the IRGC are clearly still in force. And they are very committed to the nuclear project because this is an extension, as they see it, of their sovereignty. So they have been willing in the past to accept some limits on the nuclear program. That was the Obama deal in 2015, but not to say that they're going to get rid of it altogether. And there's no evidence that they ever will. So what kind of deal can the president strike if they're not willing to give it up and he's not willing to accept something short of complete abandonment? That's the real rub here. And that leaves the president in a box. Does that mean he wants to go back to full-scale military operations? And if that's the case, is there any evidence that that's going to actually change anybody's mind? The Iranians think that they haven't lost, so they're willing to hold out for the best deal that they think they can get.
General, let me ask you about the nuclear or the enriched uranium that remains under the rubble. Again, if Donald Trump wants no nuclear missiles, no nuclear capability by the Iranians, what about all that stuff that still remains? The Iranians apparently say they can't get to it. Does that mean that Donald Trump would send in troops? And how risky is that?
Well, we're in a terrible box on this entire nuclear issue. The only way to delay an Iranian nuclear program is to get international inspectors back in on the ground with robust rules of engagement and to get out of the country not just the 1,000 pounds of 60% HEU, but also all the 20% enrichment, which is only a fairly short industrial process to get it to do nuclear capability. So it's really a problem. I think going in with U.S. military forces on the ground is not possible. I think it'd be a division-sized operation or more, massive commitment of air power, an isolated airhead deep in the Iranian country. There may be 3 locations where nuke fissile material is stored, not just the Isfahan facility. So I don't think it's doable. At the end of the day, the Iranians, despite their massive military loss to 13,000 airstrikes, no, we cannot change the regime, open the Gulf, or end the nuclear program with air power. So Mr. Trump's got to connect diplomacy to the military equation.
Yeah, and if the deal on the table is suspending uranium enrichment for 10, 15, 20 years, there is a question of whether that is much better, if it is better at all, from where we were before, especially in Inzamam, you're on the Strait. If Iran maintains control of the Strait, and all analysis has said that there's no way that Iran is not going to use that leverage going forward.
Well, Iran's goal is to try and get out of this.
Inzamam, go ahead.
Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, Iran's goal is to try and get out of this conflict a lot in a better position than it was when it started it 2 months ago, or when the US and Israel started it. Now, what the IRGC have actually said this evening in response to particularly the nuclear point and what they've said in that Iranian response, they've actually said that contrary to claims by some Western media outlets, the Iranian text contains no provision for accepting the removal of enriched nuclear materials from the country. In its proposed plan to receive its blocked funds, Iran has specified a set time frame. The United States had written in its plan that it would release Iran's blocked funds, but Iran has emphasized that these funds must be released within a specific period. I think what is interesting is that this whole talk of the nuclear situation, if I may just on that point, is that in this pre-proposal, that's what the US has put in order. It needs to have the nuclear discussions on the table in order for the two sides to meet in person and to have these negotiations over this 30-day period. And I think the gentlemen on our panel are probably more experienced in negotiating than I am. The most I've done is probably in a bazaar in Istanbul somewhere. But you've got to have negotiations face to face. And I think that's what Iran and the US want to try and do. And then they can thrash out the details around Iran's nuclear program. They've said all along that they don't want to create a nuclear bomb, whether you believe them or not. They do not want their nuclear infrastructure touched, but they may come to the negotiation table and discuss whether it is offset to a third party, to another country, whether they stop enriching uranium for a certain period of time. But in order to have those discussions, the two sides need to meet. But you're right, Katie. Look, the Strait of Hormuz wasn't an issue before this conflict started. It's a huge issue now. It's a massive sticking point. Iran can effectively take control of that waterway whenever they want to, even long after a deal has been signed and agreed upon. And right now, with the US blockade in force, yes, we're not seeing as many ships pass through. And yes, effectively, that blockade is working to some point. But the US can't be here forever, and they won't be here forever. And Iran can essentially take back control of that waterway if they want to.
Are there negotiations happening or ongoing? Peter, is there something happening behind the scenes?
Well, that's the thing, you never know for sure, right? I mean, obviously, the Obama administration negotiated in secret with Iran for many, many months, didn't even tell their allies before they got to the point where they could get into a more public-facing negotiation. We don't know of any of those kind of negotiations going on right now other than through Pakistan. But, you know, there are other intermediaries the Trump administration could use if it's choosing to. The issue seems to be, you know, one of expectations. Trump is acting as if he's won. Iran is acting as if he hasn't won. And as long as they're starting off from two different sets of expectations, it's awfully hard to meet in the middle here. And there is no middle on the issue of whether or not they have a nuclear program if the goal, as President Trump has said, is they have none, and Iran is insistent that it has the sovereign right to have one. Now, the Obama deal in 2015 said they could not do enrichment of anything other than low enrichment uranium for 15 years. If what Trump is talking about is 20 years, it's of a piece, right? Slightly better, obviously, than an Obama deal, but it's of a piece. It's not actually getting rid of the nuclear program forever. It's simply saying we're going to hold off for a while and try to buy time.
What about the subject of munitions? We've been talking about this a lot, General. Let me play Senator Mark Kelly talking about a briefing he got from the Pentagon on what we've used and what we have left.
We've been briefed by the Pentagon on specific munitions. Actually, it's been pretty detailed on Tomahawks, ATACMS, SM-3s, THAAD rounds, Patriot rounds, so those interceptor rounds to defend ourselves. And the numbers are, I think it's fair to say it's shocking, how deep we have gone into these magazines. The munitions are depleted. You may have seen me ask the Secretary of Defense this question about how long it's going to take to replenish. We're talking about years.
So explain the significance of that for me, General.
Well, I think trying to deter Chinese aggression against Taiwan and indeed in the South China Sea requires a credible U.S. Navy and air power in particular presence in the Pacific Rim. A lot of that's built around these smart munitions, not just the offensive munitions like Tomahawk and the Army's new long-range rocket, but also defensive missiles to allow the Navy to get in from 200-300 miles out and actually affect a potential Chinese military operation. It's a problem. It's not just our dependence on those missiles, because we're also rapidly fielding directed energy weapons that are already deployed in the Gulf. So I don't think it's a game changer necessarily, but we've had a 20-year underinvestment in defense industry and in particular munitions stockpiling.